Hi, this is Bob Holo. It's Django Fest Northwest 2012. It is the 5th day. We are all very happy. We all have very sore fingers, and we're all very tired. And Patrice and I were talking the other day because I get a lot of questions when I'm up here at Django Fest, and people walk up and they say, my guitar, it does this thing, and so I look at the guitar, and it struck us last night that there are some things that I can just explain pretty quickly in a video, and it'll probably help a lot of people. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to go over basically Gypsy jazz, action, setup, neck relief, some basic things so that you understand what's going on and why the guitar functions the way it does. And once you understand why, the how is pretty quick and pretty simple to get to, and you'll probably never feel totally lost again when you're going to set up your guitar. So the first thing that's important to understand, you see some of the guitar strings are smaller and some are larger. Let's talk about frequency, low, high, and what that means for power and what that means for action. So the basic physics of it is that if you drop an octave and you want to maintain the same volume, or what's called sound pressure level, you have to increase the amount of energy that you put in to the system. In other words, the amount of energy that your hand puts in, the mass of the string, everything like that. You have to quadruple it in order to half the frequency and maintain the same volume. What's that mean? It means that every time you drop an octave, there's 4 times as much action going on. Well, action is called amplitude in this case. Think of it as amplitude. It's not quite that simple, but that will get you through. That concept will anchor you. In other words, you have to have more area under the string, between the string and the fretboard, on the low strings than you do on the high strings, because fundamentally they vibrate more. And now you know why. Physics says, drop the frequency 1 octave and it requires 4 times the power, or, as we just learned, 4 times the amplitude. So the question becomes, then, well, what's a good action? And I've been setting up guitars here for the people who play this festival for years now. And I can tell you that 90% of them, if you hand them a guitar that's set up between 2.8 and 3 millimeters on the low E, and 2.3 to 2.4 millimeters on the high E, with about 11 to 14 thousandths relief in the neck, they're just happy as clams. And they do the show and they come back to you and they say, wow, I love that the guitar played great. So, although some people have higher action to get certain effects, and some people have lower action to get certain effects, and some people have more relief in the neck and less relief in the neck, that's a pretty good thing to do. If you get 2.8 to 2.9 here on the low E, 2.3 to 2.4 on the high E, you've got a nice neck, nice frets, and you've got about, say, 12 to 14 thousandths of an inch relief in the neck, you're going to be golden. All right, well, what does all that mean? Action is measured at the 12th fret. This is a 14 fret to the body guitar, and the 12th fret would therefore be here, 14, 13, 12. The action is the distance between the top of the fret and the bottom of the wire. Now you can measure that a number of different ways. You can buy calipers, you can buy little gauges. It's not something you're going to be able to do by eye. But there are many solutions, and I'm not even going to tell you which one you should use, because use the one that's your favorite. Some people stick a pick in here. If they get a 2.5 millimeter pick and they stick it in here and it's a little tight, that probably means it's a little less than 2.5. If they get a 3 millimeter pick and they put it in here and it's a little bit tight, that probably means it's a little less than 3 millimeters, and that works just fine. So, relief. A lot of people say, well, I want more relief in my neck, so I'm going to turn my truss rod or whatever, and they picture relief as curvature in the neck. But in fact, it's not. It would be better to characterize relief as tip up into the end of the neck, like this. And why is that? Well, when you vibrate a guitar string, it forms an ovoid shape, right? But there are also harmonics all the way up, and those are in the sound of the string. So when you're getting a crunchy, part of that is you're driving the string into the fret and causing it to go a little crazy. Part of that is the fundamental, and part of that is the harmonic series, right? So to make a very long story very short, the string, when it vibrates, doesn't look like a neat ovoid shape, as some people assume. It actually looks pretty messy, right? All along its length. And so what this means is that if your neck is bumped like this, you know, with relief in the center, this is going to be a bump between where you're fretting and the bridge. Think of it this way. If you were standing on the top of a hill and you were looking at a spot on the ground and you wanted to keep your eye on that spot and you walked down the hill, you'd be able to keep your eye on that spot. Now, if there was sort of a gully and you were standing on one side and there was a spot on the other side and you wanted to keep your eye on that, as soon as you went down into the gully, you'd no longer be able to see the spot. Well, that's sort of what it is when you fret a string. The string wants to see the bridge. If it doesn't see a clear path to the bridge, it's going to buzz out. If it can see a clear path to the bridge and nothing is in its way, then it'll vibrate cleanly. So what you want is a neck that goes like this. Now you measure the relief as the distance, you know, you take the 14th fret, first fret, and right about in the middle, that's where you measure the relief, but the relief goes like this. So what that means is don't mess with your truss rod, you know. I can count the number of guitars where people have come up to me and said, oh, my guitars, you know, action and relief are all out of whack and I don't know what happened. And what happens is they say, oh, my action's too low, I'm going to adjust my truss rod. Well, okay, so they adjust the truss rod, well, the action goes way up, then they lower the action. Well, then they have to bring the relief up more to compensate for it, and you can quickly see that you ratchet yourself into a real bad situation. So that's why it's important to know these sort of absolute values. If you have a relief in your neck of about 11 to 14 thousandths of an inch, and you have 2.8 and 2.3, you're going to be pretty golden, assuming that your frets are fairly level. Let's talk about string stretch. Oh, yeah. So one of the reasons that it's good to have a very conservative setup, like the one I've just described to you, is that it's good for your intonation. Now, intonation is important because if you want to, right, if you want to play something that has a crunchy sound, things have to be in tune. Because, again, everything you play, you're getting the note and the harmonic series. And when those line up, you get a very nice crunchy sound. When they don't line up, you get a dull, fuzzy sound. Now, it's important to note for intonation that if you were to stretch a string, you're changing the pitch. Now turn it on its side. Every time you fret a note, you're stretching the string. And when you raise your action, you're stretching the string more. As you start here, you stretch it more and more and more and more as you go up. When you increase your relief, you stretch it more and more and more very quickly up to mid-neck and then more and more still. So the more relief you have in your neck and the higher your action, the more atrociously difficult it's going to be to have anything approaching good intonation. So for all you guys who like to play with 4.5 millimeter action, well, you're going to have a heck of a time making your guitar intonate well. So let's talk a little bit about intonation. You know, why am I going over, spending so much time about what a proper action is and what a proper relief is? It's because string stretch affects your intonation quite a bit. If you bend a note, all you're really doing is the same thing you do every time you fret a note. Every time you fret a note, you're bending the string. And the intonation of your guitar, which is built into, you know, the funny shape of the bridge, into the spacing of the frets, if you have anything going on at the nut that's intonated, all of that assumes that you're going to have a certain proportional amount of string stretch as you're playing the guitar. And so as you move up the fretboard, you can see that the distance between here and here is shorter, right? Given the tension of the string, the mass of the string, the distance is relative to the pitch. Okay, that sounds obvious. But now, let's think of something that's not quite so obvious. If I play the harmonic and I fret the string, and they're the same, Okay, for you guys who know a lot about intonation, I'm glossing over some details here. But hey, go with it. If they're the same, it means the intonation is good. If you do the harmonic and the fretted note is sharp, well, what's it mean? Well, in this case, it means I'm, bending the note. But what it really means is that the distance is too short, right? As I move up here and shorten the distance between the fret and the bridge, the tone raises. So if I'm sharp, it means this distance is too short, and that means you need to move the bridge back. So if you think about it, this is confusing at first. Every time I tell somebody, this, it makes them think a little while. Once you think about it enough, it'll become so obvious you'll be almost embarrassed that you didn't get it at first. It's that simple. So, if my bridge is back here, I'm just going to slide this back, you'll notice that it's flat. So what would I do? Well, I go back here and I slide the bridge until, let's just pretend that's perfect because I don't want to spend a couple of minutes doing this on a video. But that's essentially what you do. And keep in mind that the Western scale of music is mathematically imperfect. Guitars, there's no way to get straight things to line up to concepts that are not straight, concepts that are not linear. So the guitar and every other instrument in the world is an approximation. You're never going to get perfect intonation. But your job is to get your guitar set up right, with the right action, with the right relief, and then do what you can, moving the bridge around until you get all the notes, intonated to where you're happy with it. And guess what? In the real world, this stuff changes with temperature, it changes with humidity, because the more humid a guitar is, the more the top raises, the action raises, and as we just learned from all these things, the intonation changes. So you might find yourself sliding your bridge around a little bit to get the intonation right on your guitar, and that's okay. And it's a lot better than messing with your truss wrench, or your truss rod, truss wrench, whatever, because you can damage your guitar that way. Now, if you slide this around and you crack your guitar and hurt your guitar, obviously you can damage it that way too. But what I'm saying is, before you start reaching for radical solutions like changing your truss or raising or lowering your bridge, make sure the guitar plays cleanly, make sure it's roughly approximate to what I've just told you is a pretty decent setup, mess with your bridge, and it'll result in a guitar that plays well. So in conclusion, good action, 2.8 to 2.3, 2.9 to 2.4, 11 to 14 thousandths in the neck, intonate your bridge, have fun playing.